Take your black ass to that bench and wait outside where you belong." Officer Bradley Mitchell's voice cut through the crisp morning air like a blade. Judge Theodore Washington froze in his tracks, gripping his old briefcase as if it were an anchor. Mitchell thrust a finger toward a row of benches where other black visitors sat in silence. His lip curled into a sneer. "Move it! Outside!" Humiliation struck the 68-year-old man like a blow. White attorneys streamed past without interruption, their polished shoes clicking against the marble steps, while Mitchell's glare lingered on him with open contempt. 3 weeks into the job, and the young officer had already chosen his prey. Washington's pressed suit meant nothing. His calm demeanor meant nothing. His decades of education meant nothing. To Mitchell, the only thing that mattered was the color of his skin. On those courthouse steps, racism revealed itself in the open, bold as daylight. Have you ever seen dignity stripped from someone by words meant to wound? Cumberland County Courthouse loomed above them, marble columns shining under the October sky, stone eagles staring down as if to mock the promise of justice within. The plaza bustled with morning routines, lawyers juggling files and coffee, clerks greeting each other with quick nods, families clutching hope. For 25 years, Judge Theodore Washington had walked those steps with quiet pride. His usual reserved spot was in the repair shop, so today his Honda Civic sat in the visitor lot. Still, he arrived early as always, carrying the weathered briefcase gifted by his mentor decades ago. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from the lobby. Just minutes earlier, he had stooped to help an elderly white woman gather papers scattered by the wind. Her grateful smile reminded him why he'd chosen the path of justice over money. To him, the law had always been about dignity, never profit. At 8:47 a.m., his phone buzzed with a message from his clerk about a minor schedule change. Court began promptly at 9, and he had never once been late. He climbed the steps, steady and unhurried, the leather handle of his briefcase warm in his hand. Officer Bradley Mitchell adjusted the radio strapped to his chest. 3 weeks into this courthouse post, he already carried himself like a man in charge. He'd left the TSA behind. Too many rules, too many restrictions. Here, he could follow his instincts. Introductions with staff weren't even scheduled until the following week, but Mitchell didn't need names. He had already decided who belonged and who didn't. Behind his mirrored aviators, the young officer scanned the crowd like a predator circling its prey. Inside, the courthouse lobby stirred with its usual rhythm, clerks laughing over weekend stories, lawyers greeting one another by name. Justice was supposed to live here, but on the steps outside, injustice had already claimed its stage. Security cameras recorded everything, the quick handshakes, the polite smiles, the daily rhythm of courthouse life. The lobby walls displayed moments frozen in time, governors shaking hands, retirement send-offs, milestone anniversaries. Near the main entrance hung a portrait of Judge Theodore Washington, captured in his 20th year of service, his steady smile a silent guardian of the building he'd dedicated his life to. Officer Bradley Mitchell passed by that portrait twice a day, never once pausing to notice it. Behind the protective glass window, court clerk Maria Gonzalez was already sorting through stacks of morning files. For 15 years, she had worked side by side with Judge Washington. She knew the details of his routine, how he liked his coffee, the way he remembered her son's graduation, even the date of his granddaughter's birthday. To him, respect was universal. It extended to every person he met, whether it was a Supreme Court justice or the janitor mopping the floors. Mitchell's radio buzzed with morning check-ins. His replies were curt, clipped, the product of years working airport security. The rules echoed in his head like scripture. Control the crowd, trust no one, spot the liars before they move. He believed them. He had built his entire worldview on them. On the courthouse plaza, the day carried on like any other. The sun threw sharp shadows across the marble steps. American flags snapped in the cool October breeze as commuters hurried past, each wrapped up in the business of ordinary life, unaware that a very different kind of history was about to be written here. Judge Washington checked his watch. 8:48 a.m. There was still time to glance through sentencing notes before court convened. He had spent Sunday evening reflecting on the case of a young man with a fractured childhood, wrestling once again with the balance between justice and mercy. These were the choices that unsettled his sleep. But that was the mark of a good judge, caring enough to lose rest over the weight of fairness. Other judges were slipping through the private entrance, key cards chiming softly against scanners. Washington had that option too, but he never took it. He preferred to walk with the public, to remind himself that he was not above them, but among them. A judge, yes, but first and foremost a servant of the people. Mitchell's eyes locked onto every black face approaching the doors. His training at TSA had taught him to read patterns, to look for threats, to trust the numbers. In 3 short weeks on courthouse duty, those instincts had hardened into something else, something uglier. The security checkpoint buzzed with routine efficiency. Metal detectors beeped in steady intervals. Bags rolled along conveyor belts into the X-ray machine. Mitchell's colleagues greeted people politely, checking IDs with calm professionalism before waving them through. Inside Judge Washington's worn leather briefcase was more than paperwork. It held decades of accumulated wisdom, legal arguments, handwritten reflections on defendants' lives, a pair of reading glasses tucked into a cracked case. And among those serious documents was a drawing in crayon, carefully lettered, "Best Grandpa Judge Ever." It reminded him every morning that justice wasn't abstract. It was about people, about families, about the lives touched by his decisions. Above the courthouse doors, the carved inscription promised equal justice under law. Judge Theodore Washington had spent his entire career trying to make those words more than stone. As a young civil rights lawyer, he had stood in Southern courtrooms challenging discrimination head-on. Later, as a judge, he had fought to ensure that fairness reached everyone, no matter their race, their bank account, or their background. Across the plaza, Officer Bradley Mitchell tugged at his crisp uniform and checked his gear. Taser charged, radio clear, authority unquestioned. He was ready. In his mind, this was what true security looked like. Firm hands, no softness, no tolerance for people he labeled suspicious, trying to slip by on charm or excuses. The October sun climbed higher, throwing warm light across the marble steps where generations of citizens had come in search of justice. Today would write a new line into that history. Some days honored the nation's ideals. Others exposed just how far those ideals still had to go. At exactly 8:52 a.m., Judge Washington reached the main doors, briefcase in hand. He walked with the quiet confidence of a man who belonged, the sun at his back, his worn leather case swinging gently at his side. He stepped toward the metal detector, only to be blocked. Mitchell moved in like a barricade, palm raised in a commanding halt. His mirrored sunglasses caught Washington's startled reflection. "Hold up there, Pops. Employees only pass this point. You wait outside with the others." He jabbed a finger toward a nearby bench where 4 black community members already sat waiting. The gesture had the careless cruelty of someone herding cattle. Washington paused, keeping his grip steady on the old briefcase. A quarter-century on the bench had taught him how to remain composed under pressure, but this moment cut deeper. It wasn't procedure, it was personal. "I'm sorry, officer. There must be some mistake." "I work here." Mitchell let out a sharp laugh, humorless and hard. His eyes flicked over Washington, taking in the plain, dark suit, the scuffed briefcase, the lack of polished accessories that would, to him, prove legal authority. Training from his TSA days echoed in his mind: assume nothing, trust no one, especially those claiming special access. "Sure you do. And I'm the Chief Justice. Look, buddy, I've been here 3 weeks. I know every employee. Never seen you before. So you're waiting outside like everybody else." The words landed like blows. Around them, the morning crowd slowed, heads turning to watch the exchange. Conversations hushed. Attorney Sarah Carter stopped in her tracks, pulling her phone from her bag. Attorney Sarah Carter lifted her phone, recognizing instantly that something newsworthy was unfolding before her eyes. From inside the glass doors, Clerk Maria Gonzalez spotted the confrontation. 15 years working with Judge Washington had trained her instincts. She dropped her files and hurried toward the entrance. Meanwhile, white attorneys strode past Officer Mitchell without issue. A flash of a badge, a polite nod, and they were waved through. The disparity was glaring, so sharp it couldn't be mistaken for accident. Judge Washington moved deliberately, every gesture measured. Slowly, he reached for his courthouse ID badge. His calm carried the weight of dignity, even though patience was becoming almost unbearable. "Officer," he said evenly, "I understand you're new here. Allow me to show you my identification." "Don't move," Mitchell barked. "Hands where I can see them." His hand dropped toward his taser, and a ripple of alarm spread through the watching crowd. Old habits from airport security had completely overtaken his judgment. "You people always think you can talk your way past the rules. Not on my watch." The racial undertone wasn't subtle. Washington's jaw tightened. He raised both hands, his briefcase dangling loosely from one wrist. 30 years in civil rights work had prepared him for moments like this, but preparation never softened the sting of public humiliation. Mitchell shoved him toward the wall, forcing the elderly judge to spread his hands against the cold marble like a suspect. Gasps and murmurs rippled across the plaza. "This is disgraceful." "Just disgraceful," an elderly black woman whispered from the bench, her voice carrying the weary knowledge of someone who had seen scenes like this too many times before. Attorney Carter's live stream flickered to life, her voice shaking with outrage. "Y'all aren't gonna believe this. This officer is about to make the biggest mistake of his career." Mitchell's search was rough, more spectacle than procedure. He yanked away Washington's wallet, his briefcase, even the courthouse ID, barely glancing at them. "Fake IDs are a federal offense, old man," he snapped. 3 weeks here and I've seen every trick. You're not fooling me." Inside, Washington forced himself to stay steady. He marked the details carefully. Badge numbers, faces in the crowd, the exact time. If this moment had to happen, he would at least make sure it carried meaning beyond his own humiliation. Mitchell finally glanced at the ID badge, squinting at it as if it were spoiled milk. During his rushed orientation, he'd only been shown clerk and lawyer passes. He had no idea what a judge's credentials looked like. "This doesn't look right. Could be fake. Could be stolen. People like you are always trying to scam your way in." Mitchell flung the briefcase aside, its contents scattering across the marble steps. Legal documents swirled in the autumn breeze, decades of work treated like trash. Judge Washington watched silently, the weight of 25 years in service reduced to papers drifting across the plaza. "Officer, I strongly advise you to look again at that identification," Washington said, his voice calm but firm, the same voice that had commanded courtrooms for decades. "And perhaps call your supervisor." To Mitchell, though, it was nothing more than another black man trying to talk his way out of trouble. "I don't need backup to spot a liar. 3 weeks here, and I can read people like a book. You've got 60 seconds to move to that bench and wait like everyone else, or you're going to jail." Inside, Maria Gonzalez reached the glass doors, waving frantically at the bailiffs. Other courthouse staff gathered quickly, recognizing Washington's silhouette even from a distance. Outside, Attorney Carter's live stream surged as viewers poured in, her commentary urgent and biting. "This officer has no idea who he's dealing with. It's about to blow up." Mitchell glanced at his watch with exaggerated precision. "Time's up, Grandpa. You're under arrest for trespassing and attempting unauthorized entry into a federal building." His hand closed on the cuffs, his confidence unshaken. 3 weeks on the job had convinced him that cracking down early prevented bigger problems later. Washington closed his eyes for a breath, remembering his father's quiet endurance in the face of uglier injustices. Sometimes dignity means allowing the wrong to play out, so the truth can be seen by all. "Officer Mitchell, yes, I can read your nameplate," he said evenly. "You are committing the gravest mistake of your very brief career. I have given you every chance to confirm my identity properly. Remember that when this is resolved." Mitchell snapped the cuffs on tight, the steel cutting into Washington's wrists. The crowd's murmurs rose into outrage as the respected judge was paraded like a criminal. "Save the speeches for your public defender, Your Honor," Mitchell sneered. "You're about to learn what happens when you lie to federal security." And with that, the perp walk began. Down the courthouse steps they went, Mitchell leading with the swagger of a man convinced he was protecting the nation. Washington walking behind with steady dignity, every step measured. Carter's live stream erupted, thousands of viewers flooding the feed in disbelief and anger. Across phone screens, across states, America was watching justice reveal its ugliest face. Above it all, the stone inscription glared down in bitter irony. Equal justice under law. The words, equal justice under law, etched in stone, became bitterly ironic as a sitting judge was hauled away in handcuffs for no greater crime than being black while judicial. Inside the courthouse, panic stirred. Bailiffs scrambled for supervisors, clerks whispered nervously, and defendants sat in confusion as the morning docket stalled. At 8:58 a.m., Judge Washington should have been stepping onto the bench. Instead, he was locked inside a patrol car, detained by a rookie guard with 3 weeks' experience who had just arrested one of North Carolina's most respected jurists. Mitchell slammed the squad car door shut with smug finality. Another threat neutralized. Another win for courthouse security. Another day of keeping real Americans safe from those he believed didn't belong. He had no clue that within the next 60 seconds, his career, his reputation, and his worldview would unravel completely. Keying his radio with the swagger of a patriot saving democracy, Mitchell reported, "Code 1054, need backup at main entrance. Non-compliant individual refusing security directives." Officer Dennis Murphy arrived moments later, breathless from his patrol of the building. With 6 months under his belt, he felt like a veteran compared to Mitchell's 3-week tenure. "What have we got, Brad?" Mitchell pointed toward Washington, sitting cuffed in the back seat. "Picked up a vagrant trying to bluff his way inside. Claims he works here, probably casing the place to steal something. You know how they are." The casual racism clung to the morning air like smoke. Murphy nodded without question, trusting his partner's judgment, even as the crowd of witnesses swelled with visible anger. "All right, let's process him before he stirs up more trouble." Mitchell pulled Washington from the car, the handcuffs flashing in the sunlight. The elderly judge stumbled slightly, his age and the restraints making it difficult to steady himself on the uneven marble steps. "Empty your pockets," Mitchell ordered. "Could be stolen credit cards, fake IDs, burglary tools. People like this always have something dirty." Washington silently complied, placing his wallet, his reading glasses, and his courthouse keys on the hood of the car. Each item was more than an object. It was a piece of his dignity, stripped away for the public to see. "Now, open the briefcase, slowly. Could be anything in there. Drugs, weapons, stolen files. I've seen it all back at the airport." Washington recognized the illegality instantly, but chose composure over escalation. Every step, every insult, every violation would be logged in his mind for the reckoning that would come later. "Officer," he said quietly, "you should know this constitutes an unlawful search without probable cause." "But I will comply." Mitchell's laugh rang out harsh and mocking. "Well, look at this. We've got ourselves a jailhouse lawyer. Murphy, hear that? This guy thinks he knows the law better than we do. Probably picked it up watching reruns in prison." The briefcase cracked open, spilling its contents across the marble like relics from another time. Official court documents stamped with Honorable Theodore Washington fluttered in the autumn breeze. A framed photo of Washington shaking hands with the governor slid across the steps. Neatly written sentencing notes, decades of careful thought about justice and mercy, scattered like discarded scraps. Murphy bent down and picked up the governor's photo, a crease forming on his brow. "Brad, this looks pretty real." Mitchell snatched it from his hands with a violent jerk. "Documents can be faked. Identity theft is everywhere. This old man's running a scam, and I'm not buying it." Nearby, Washington's glasses case popped open, revealing wire-rimmed spectacles worn smooth from years of use. A crayon drawing danced in the wind, its purple marker letters declaring, "Best Grandpa Judge Ever." Mitchell scooped up a page of Washington's handwritten notes and began reading aloud with cruel exaggeration. "Remember the defendant's troubled childhood. Consider rehabilitation over punishment," he sneered. "What kind of bleeding heart garbage is this? Liberal propaganda. Nothing more!" The crowd shifted, anger simmering into something palpable. More courthouse employees pressed against the windows, recognizing the man they knew and respected. Attorney Carter's live stream surged past 5,000 viewers, comments flooding in with disbelief and outrage. Inside, Maria Gonzalez pounded on the glass, desperate to reach the other judges before the situation spiraled further. Security cameras caught every second. On the steps, Mitchell yanked Washington by the collar, spinning him toward the growing crowd. Take a good look, people. This is what happens when you try to fool the system. He shoved Washington back against the wall with unnecessary force, scattering more documents across the plaza. Case briefs, personal letters, and family photos tumbled together like the wreckage of a life dismantled. Mitchell dug into Washington's wallet and began shouting details like a carnival barker hawking wares. Theodore Washington, 68 years old, lives on Maple Street. Probably lifted this whole identity off some dead judge. Holding up the driver's license for everyone to see, he grinned with triumph. Check it out. A fake license. Bet it came from the same criminal network that printed his phony courthouse ID. His voice grew louder, feeding off the performance, while the crowd's outrage boiled over. Mitchell's voice swelled, feeding off the crowd's tension. This is organized crime, folks. Identity theft, forged documents, impersonation of a federal official. This old man thought he could walk in here and trick trained law enforcement. From the crowd, Reverend Dr. James Butler forced his way forward, his presence radiating authority born of decades in the community. For over 20 years, he had known Judge Theodore Washington, not just as a jurist, but as a friend. Officers, stop this madness, Butler said firmly. This man is Judge Washington. He has presided in this courthouse for 25 years. I was here when he first took the bench. You're making a grave mistake. Mitchell spun around, hands snapping to his taser. Step back, Reverend. Don't interfere with federal security operations unless you want to be arrested, too. I don't care what fairy tales you've been told about this criminal. The threat sent shockwaves through the crowd. Dozens of cell phones rose into the air, cameras locking onto the confrontation. Every movement, every word was being preserved for the world to see. Mitchell raised his voice, turning his performance outward like a campaign speech. You want the truth? These criminals always work in groups. They coach each other, rehearse the same sob stories, twist the sympathy of good, law-abiding citizens. He snatched a handful of Washington's scattered papers from the ground and shook them in the air. Look at this. Professional forgeries, fake letterhead, counterfeit seals. Someone poured real money into making these look authentic, but you can't fool me. Mitchell shoved Washington down onto the cold marble, forcing the 68-year-old man to his knees. Pick it up, all of it. Every piece of your fake little story. Maybe some jail time will finally teach you not to impersonate a judge. The sight was devastating, an honored jurist made to crawl like a servant, gathering scraps of his own career while the crowd watched in stunned outrage. Washington's knees ground against the stone as he retrieved each document. Each page a testament to decades of justice, fairness, and lives changed. Mitchell, puffed up with self-importance, pulled out his phone and called courthouse dispatch. His voice carried like an actor reading lines on stage. Yeah, this is Officer Mitchell at the main entrance. I need a supervisor here immediately. We've got ourselves a high-level identity theft case. Federal charges pending. The call routed directly to Janet Walsh, courthouse security supervisor, stuck in a budget meeting 3 floors above. Mitchell, Walsh said sharply through the line. What identity theft case are you talking about? Mitchell didn't hesitate. Black male, around 70, claims to be a judge, carrying stacks of forged federal documents. Fake courthouse ID, phony documents, community accomplices, the whole operation, Mitchell declared into the phone. Pretty elaborate scam. On the 3rd floor, Supervisor Janet Walsh nearly dropped her cell. She had worked alongside Judge Washington for 8 years, trusted his integrity, admired his discipline. As Mitchell rattled off his description, elderly black male, gray beard, worn suit, battered briefcase filled with official-looking papers, several witnesses colluding to defend him, Walsh's stomach turned. There was no mistake. He was describing Judge Theodore Washington. Her voice snapped through the line, urgent and clipped. Mitchell, do not process that arrest. I repeat, do nothing until I get there. I am coming down immediately. Do you understand? But Mitchell had already ended the call, smug in his certainty that backup was arriving to confirm his brilliant work. He straightened his shoulders and muttered loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Supervisors are on their way to see what real security looks like. You picked the wrong courthouse, old man, and the wrong day." He turned back to Washington, determined to stage manage the humiliation further. "Empty your pockets, again. Shoes off this time. Could be blades, lockpicks. Criminal masterminds always hide something." The 68-year-old judge complied silently, lowering himself to the marble once more. His judicial robes hung in chambers just 3 floors above. Yet here he was, reduced to kneeling barefoot on courthouse steps like a street criminal, gathering what remained of his dignity along with scattered pages of his career. Attorney Carter's live stream surged past 20,000 viewers. Comments scrolled in a blur: rage, disbelief, vows of lawsuits, promises that Mitchell's career was finished before it had truly begun. Officer Murphy shifted uneasily, his instincts screaming. "Brad, maybe we should hold up until the supervisor gets here. Something's not adding up. This doesn't feel right." Mitchell shot him a glare. "Don't go soft on me now. This is exactly the kind of sophisticated operation we're trained to stop. Real law enforcement requires backbone." He yanked Washington roughly back to his feet. The handcuffs had already cut circulation. The judge's fingers were pale, bloodless. "You're headed to county lockup until we sort this out. A night in jail will make you think twice before trying to con the system again." "Convince yourself this was justice," Washington said evenly, his gaze cutting straight into Mitchell's bravado. The tone was calm but carried the weight of decades on the bench. "And when this ends, and it will end very soon, I want you to remember exactly how it felt to wield power over another man's dignity." The courthouse clock struck, 8:59. Each chime echoed like a countdown to judgment. At that very instant, the grand courthouse doors slammed open with the urgency of alarm bells. Chief Judge Margaret Harrison stormed forward, her black robes flowing like battle armor, flanked by 3 deputies and security supervisor Janet Walsh sprinting at her heels. "Officer Mitchell, unhand Judge Washington, now!" Her command cracked through the plaza like thunder. The crowd froze mid-breath. Mitchell halted mid-step, his grip still locked on Washington's restrained arm. The self-assured grin drained from his face, confusion setting in. "Judge Washington?" His voice wavered, disbelief tangled with fear. "No, ma'am. This man was pretending to be court staff." "This man," Harrison cut him off, holding up her phone, "is the Honorable Theodore Washington, senior judge of this courthouse for 25 years. She thrust the screen into the sunlight. The official website portrait stared back at Mitchell. Same silver beard, same calm authority etched into every line of his face. Mitchell's chest tightened. His vision blurred. It felt like the ground itself was falling away. His hands began to tremble violently. Words spilled out in stuttering fragments. I've only been here 3 weeks. No one told me. I didn't know." The foundation of his false confidence crumbled in seconds. Supervisor Walsh burst forward, breath ragged from her dash down 3 flights of stairs. Her voice shook with fury and disbelief. "Mitchell, what have you done? Do you have any idea who you've just humiliated?" Deputy Carl Stevens, who had served alongside Judge Washington for over 15 years, fumbled with the cuffs, his own hands unsteady as he freed them from Washington's wrists. His eyes burned with shame. "Your Honor, I can't express how sorry I am. In all my years, I have never witnessed anything like this." "Never." Washington flexed his fingers, rubbing warmth back into his circulation. With every slow movement, his poise returned, his dignity settling over him once more, unshaken by chains, restored in full view of the very institution he had served his entire life. Washington inhaled slowly, restoring composure with every breath. Despite the humiliation, he extended a steady hand towards Stevens. "Thank you, Carl. Help me gather these papers. We'll address this through the proper channels." Mitchell collapsed to his knees, scooping up scattered documents with trembling fingers. The same files he had mocked as forgeries now glared back at him as undeniable proof of judicial authority. His voice cracked with panic. "Your Honor, please, I didn't know. I'm new here. No one showed me your picture. I thought I thought I was protecting the courthouse. 3 weeks of imagined power dissolved into the weight of 3 decades of consequences. Washington's reply was measured, deliberate, every word a gavel strike. Officer Mitchell, tell me, what exactly went through your mind when you saw me? That an older black man couldn't possibly belong here unless he was a defendant? Or a janitor? The silence that followed was crushing. Mitchell's lips parted, but nothing came. The truth was too corrosive to voice. The crowd erupted, a wave of vindication sweeping across the plaza. Carter's live stream surged to 25,000 viewers, comments cascading in dozens of languages. Justice is coming. Reverend Butler lifted his voice, leading the community in applause both solemn and triumphant. For him, knowing Washington's integrity for a quarter century, the moment was equal parts heartbreak and hope. From behind the courthouse glass, white employees finally stepped forward. Their late arrival spoke volumes about fear and complacency, but their presence now offered at least a glimmer of redemption. Officer Murphy edged backward, desperate to detach himself from Mitchell's disgrace. I was only responding to backup. Brad called it in. I never touched the judge. Supervisor Walsh's face was scarlet with fury and shame. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Mitchell, badge and radio, now. You are suspended, pending full investigation. Mitchell's fingers quivered as he unpinned the badge that had so quickly poisoned his judgment. The radio followed, its static fading into silence like the end of a dying signal. Washington, calm as ever, photographed his torn jacket, the bruises on his wrists, and the scattered pages of his briefcase. His precision was the same he had brought to thousands of rulings. Officer Mitchell, you'll be hearing from Internal Affairs, the District Attorney, and the Civil Rights Division. But first, he straightened his shoulders, dignity fully restored. I have a courtroom to preside over. The crowd outside the courthouse shifted as Judge Washington climbed the steps with dignity fully restored. The balance of power had turned on its head. Officer Mitchell remained on his knees, surrounded by papers he had scattered himself, his career collapsing before it had ever taken shape. Chief Judge Harrison's voice rang with institutional finality. Officer Mitchell, you are suspended without pay, effective immediately. Report to Internal Affairs at 2 p.m. today. Do not set foot on courthouse property again. At the doorway, Washington stopped and glanced back. Mitchell was still kneeling, broken among fragments of legal briefs and official documents. Then Washington's gaze lifted to the inscription etched in stone above the entrance. Equal justice under law. The law applies to everyone, Officer Mitchell, he said evenly. Everyone, including you. Attorney Carter turned to her live stream, her voice electric. History just happened, folks. This video is going viral. Justice is about to be served in full view of the world. The heavy courthouse doors closed behind Washington, sealing him back inside the arena where justice was not chaotic or cruel, but orderly, deliberate, and fair. What had begun as humiliation was already shifting toward accountability. Outside, Mitchell stayed on his knees, staring at the wreckage of his pride. Tears streaked down his cheeks as he clutched Washington's correspondence with unsteady hands. Your Honor, please, he pleaded. I've got 2 kids, a mortgage, child support. I just got assigned here 3 weeks ago. No one trained me. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Don't ruin my life over this. His voice fractured, weighed down by the enormity of what he'd unleashed. 3 weeks on the job had just set the course for 3 decades of consequences. Washington paused once more at the steps, briefcase steady in his grip. He looked down at the man who had publicly degraded him minutes earlier. Officer Mitchell, intent does not erase impact. What you did today wasn't just about me. Your assumptions expose what countless people of color face every time they walk into this building. Supervisor Janet Walsh, face flushed with professional shame, took charge of damage control. She guided Mitchell toward the parking lot as employees peered from the windows. Brad, she ordered sharply, hand over your access badge, your parking pass, and any other courthouse property. Now. You're barred from courthouse grounds until the investigation is complete. Walsh's tone was sharp, final. Mitchell fumbled through his wallet, hands trembling as he surrendered his access badge, parking pass, and ID cards. each one clattering like another nail sealing his career's coffin. Attorney Carter stepped forward, phone still streaming to 30,000 live viewers across the globe. Your Honor, the entire encounter is on video. It's already been shared more than 100,000 times. Would you like the recordings for evidence? Washington inclined his head gravely. Yes, please deliver everything directly to my clerk. This record will be essential for what follows. Reverend Butler raised his voice, calming the restless crowd with pastoral authority. Judge Washington, this community stands ready. We'll testify. None of this will be hidden or ignored. Too many eyes have seen the truth today. Several courthouse security officers filtered out, their faces shadowed with shame and anger. Mitchell's 3 weeks of unchecked bias had stained their reputations as well. Officer Davis finally spoke, his voice weighted with guilt. Judge Washington, we noticed Brad's behavior. He singled out black visitors every day. We didn't know how to bring it forward without proof. Mitchell stammered through feeble excuses. I was just using airport procedures. I treat everyone the same. Nobody's ever accused me of racism before. I just didn't recognize you without your robes. Washington's reply was steady, steeped in the wisdom of decades in law and civil rights. Officer Mitchell, racism isn't always deliberate. It hides in assumptions, in quick judgments made about people who look a certain way, in the uneven standards applied without thinking. Intent does not erase impact. Within 20 minutes, the first local news van screeched to a stop. Reporter Jessica Martinez was already live on the courthouse steps. This is Jessica Martinez with Channel 7, covering breaking news from Cumberland County Courthouse. A viral video shows a senior judge being wrongfully arrested by security. The story spread like wildfire across the internet. Hashtag Judge Washington trended nationwide as footage ricocheted across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Reporters gathered more details from courthouse staff who confirmed Mitchell's ongoing pattern of racial profiling. 3 short weeks had been enough to reveal a disturbing record of bias. Court clerk Maria Gonzalez, her voice breaking, faced the cameras. Judge Washington is the heart of this courthouse. He's guided countless young attorneys, treated everyone with dignity. Race, title, or background never mattered to him. Seeing this happen to him, it shatters me. Chief Judge Harrison wasted no time addressing the institution's failures. Effective immediately, all non-essential security screenings are suspended. We are launching a complete review of our protocols, and every member of staff will undergo mandatory bias training. Washington himself framed the matter in broader terms, his calm presence commanding attention. This incident will be handled properly through lawful channels. Justice must remain both swift and impartial. That principle applies to every individual, Officer Mitchell included. Within the hour, the story detonated online. The video surged past 500,000 shares, picked up by international outlets, amplified by civil rights groups, and drawing urgent calls from lawmakers demanding federal intervention. Out in the courthouse parking lot, Mitchell finally grasped the scope of his downfall. His phone buzzed relentlessly with incoming calls from journalists, but he couldn't lift it to his ear. Officer Murphy approached carefully. Brad, you need legal counsel. This is going to spiral before it calms. Mitchell stared back at the courthouse, the building where his short career had come undone in full public view. His voice cracked. I arrested a federal judge because I thought his skin color made him a threat. My life is finished, but the storm was only beginning. Federal investigators, potential criminal charges, civil litigation, and national disgrace were all lined up in his future. Justice had been delayed that morning, but it was not going to be denied. Within 24 hours, Internal Affairs Detective Rosa Morales opened the most sweeping inquiry in Cumberland County's history. Her office quickly transformed into a command center, walls covered in screenshots, surveillance stills, and sworn statements. We are combing through every moment of Officer Mitchell's 3 weeks here, she told reporters. Every complaint, every camera angle, every staff account. The findings painted a damning portrait. Despite his short tenure, security footage revealed a clear and escalating pattern of discriminatory treatment. At a press conference, Detective Morales laid out the numbers. In just 21 days, Mitchell had subjected 47 individuals to unnecessary, targeted security checks. Of the 47 incidents, 42 targeted people of color. an astonishing 90% rate driven purely by racial profiling. The viral wave surpassed every prediction. Attorney Carter's live stream shattered records, becoming the most watched courthouse video in social media history. Within 48 hours, it had amassed 8 million views across platforms, replayed endlessly on every major news network. Global outlets like BBC, CNN, and Al Jazeera covered the story, while civil rights icons and celebrities voiced outrage. The hashtag #WaitOutside turned into a rallying cry, uniting courthouse discrimination stories from across the nation. Thousands came forward, recounting their own humiliations at the hands of biased security officers. Within 72 hours, federal investigators touched down. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division announced a sweeping probe. DOJ Attorney Sarah Kim spoke with firm resolve. "We are determining whether this incident is part of a systemic pattern of civil rights abuses that requires direct federal oversight." Mitchell's past soon surfaced under scrutiny. Personnel records revealed buried complaints from his former TSA post. Anonymous testimony from a former airport supervisor, James Martinez, told reporters Brad had repeated accusations of profiling Middle Eastern travelers, but management always found loopholes to shield him. Most of us were relieved when he left. The 3-week security tapes painted a devastating portrait. Footage showed white visitors breezing through checkpoints, while black visitors endured lengthy interrogations. Latino families were pressed for extra paperwork. Asian attorneys were asked for unnecessary identification. Audio recordings sealed his downfall. Mitchell's own voice captured saying, "You can't trust them. They're always up to something. Watch them close or they'll exploit every gap." 1 week later, accountability arrived. District Attorney Patricia Williams, backed by federal prosecutors, announced formal charges: civil rights violations, assault, unlawful detention, and abuse of authority. Federal hate crime charges were also on the table. The case ignited a national reckoning, transforming into a symbol of both institutional racism and the urgent demand for reform. Civil rights groups rallied to defend Judge Washington, while simultaneously pushing for sweeping systemic change. NAACP Legal Defense Fund Director Janai Nelson released a statement. Judge Washington's composure in the face of humiliation represents the very essence of American resilience. His choice to answer injustice with justice sets the standard for us all. 8 months later, State v. Mitchell opened in the same courthouse where the debacle first unfolded. To ensure neutrality, Judge Patricia Moore was brought in from another district. The trial drew national attention, with cameras documenting every step of Mitchell's reckoning. His defense team labored under the weight of overwhelming proof. Prosecutor Sarah Kim wasted no time in her opening remarks. In only 3 weeks, Officer Mitchell dismantled the very principles this courthouse was built upon. This isn't merely about one man's bias, it's about safeguarding every citizen's constitutional right to equality. When Judge Washington took the witness stand, the trial reached its defining moment. His calm presence stood in stark contrast to the footage of his public humiliation. Officer Mitchell didn't see a peer that morning, Washington testified. He saw only my skin, and from that made assumptions that denied me my humanity. That is institutional racism in its rawest form. Expert testimony followed. Scholars explained how implicit bias works invisibly, yet produces tangible harm. Dr. Jennifer Eberhard of Stanford University presented her data. Bias in security contexts is unfortunately common. What makes this case extraordinary is the sheer clarity of the video evidence documenting it. Community members then described the ripple effect of Mitchell's short tenure. Black lawyers, defendants, and families spoke about feeling like outsiders in their own halls of justice. Attorney Marcus Johnson summarized the sentiment. "I've practiced law for 15 years, yet Mitchell treated me like a suspect in the very building where I fight for justice. That wasn't just personal insult. It was an assault on the system itself." Mitchell's defense team leaned heavily on a training failure argument. Attorney William Parker appealed to the jury. "My client's errors stemmed from poor orientation and unconscious bias he never recognized. He needs reform and education, not prison." But the state's case drowned out any call for sympathy. Footage revealed not only Mitchell's discriminatory practices, but also the disturbing satisfaction he seemed to take in wielding authority over those most vulnerable. The jury needed just 90 minutes to reach guilty verdicts on every charge. Post-trial interviews revealed their reasoning was clear-cut. Jury foreman Robert Carter told reporters, "The evidence was overwhelming. Mitchell broke his oath, abused his authority, and deliberately profiled citizens based on race. There was no other verdict possible." The sentencing hearings packed the courthouse as Judge Moore prepared to impose consequences. Mitchell's family begged for leniency while victims demanded accountability. Judge Moore's ruling matched the seriousness of the crimes: 18 months in prison and 500 hours of community service with civil rights groups. "Your conduct that morning wasn't just an attack on Judge Washington," she declared. "It was an assault on the very promise of equal justice." Civil litigation soon followed, with Cumberland County agreeing to a $3.2 million settlement for Washington's humiliation and the broader constitutional breaches. Washington's response revealed his vision for reform. "I will donate the entire settlement to create an equal access to justice training program for courthouse security across the nation." Sweeping reforms soon reshaped courthouse security. Mandatory 40-hour bias training for all personnel. A civilian oversight board to handle discrimination complaints. Body cameras required during every security interaction. Monthly diversity audits to monitor practices. Immediate suspension policies for officers accused of bias. Mitchell's downfall became both personal and professional. His conviction ended any chance of future law enforcement employment. Financial collapse arrived swiftly, legal bills forcing him into bankruptcy. 6 months later, his wife filed for divorce as online infamy made ordinary life unlivable. The case rippled into national politics. Congress introduced the Courthouse Equality Act, mandating federal security staff undergo anti-bias training nationwide. Congressman James Williams, the bill's sponsor, told the press, "The Mitchell case shows how fast discrimination can corrode justice. This legislation will safeguard equality inside every federal courthouse." The precedent was now established. Courthouse officers could be held personally accountable for discriminatory actions, while the reforms born from Mitchell's downfall became a model replicated throughout the justice system. Judge Washington's resilience had turned 3 minutes of public humiliation into decades of institutional reform. What began as injustice became a catalyst for accountability, progress, and an unshakable reaffirmation of constitutional values. Justice had not only been served, it had been expanded. But the true legacy was only beginning. 1 year later, Judge Theodore Washington returned to the courthouse steps where his dignity had been stripped and ultimately restored. Autumn leaves swirled across the marble where the world first witnessed his humiliation and his quiet strength. This time, hundreds gathered. Community members, courthouse staff, civil rights leaders. At the exact spot stood a bronze plaque inscribed with the words that had sparked a movement. "Wait outside, boy," Washington spoke with the gravity of transformation. "That October morning, I experienced in 3 minutes what millions endure every day, being judged by skin color rather than character. But from that moment came an opportunity to build something lasting, something just." Cumberland County Courthouse now stood as a national model for equity and accountability. The results spoke for themselves. 12 months without a single discrimination complaint. Every officer completing monthly bias training. A permanent community advisory board reviewing security policies. Visitor satisfaction rising nearly 90%. The courthouse that once embodied exclusion now symbolized inclusion. Washington's message extended beyond brick and stone. True justice is not only punishment, it is prevention. We must examine assumptions, confront hidden prejudices, and design systems that treat every individual with dignity. Meanwhile, former officer Bradley Mitchell served his sentence in a minimum security facility, participating in a restorative justice program. In a supervised interview, he reflected, "I thought I wasn't racist because I never used slurs." But racism isn't just in words, it's in the assumptions we make. The split-second judgments that dehumanize others. The community itself had grown through monthly justice forums, uniting law enforcement, civic leaders, and residents in difficult but healing conversations about bias and reform. Reverend Butler addressed the anniversary crowd with steady conviction. Judge Washington turned personal pain into public progress, humiliation into healing. That is the very definition of grace, transforming injustice into justice. National recognition carried Judge Washington's story far beyond local headlines. The Presidential Medal of Freedom citation read, "Judge Washington's response to injustice, choosing education instead of retaliation, progress instead of vengeance, embodies the highest ideals of American justice." The data reflected that this was more than symbolism. It was systemic transformation. More than 600 courthouses nationwide adopted bias training modeled on Washington's reforms. Participating facilities reported a 73% drop in discrimination complaints, with measurable gains in community trust toward the judicial system. Programs inspired by his legacy expanded into 28 states and 3 countries. The Theodore Washington Institute for Courthouse Equality became a national leader, training over 5,000 security officers. Director Maria Santos highlighted its significance. Judge Washington showed us that one individual's dignity in the face of humiliation can spark institutional change. We're seeing security staff interact with visitors in ways that reflect fairness, respect, and equality. Legacy institutions ensured that the impact would endure long after Washington himself. The Equal Access to Justice Foundation funded training programs and provided legal support for victims of discrimination across the nation. When Judge Washington addressed the anniversary crowd, his words carried the quiet authority of experience. Every injustice carries within it the seed of justice, if we have the courage to plant it and the patience to help it grow. Change is not only possible, it is inevitable when people of conscience refuse silence. His message transcended courthouse steps, resonating through both social and traditional media. Millions heard the call. This story isn't entertainment, it's a mirror. Washington's challenge was direct. Look at your assumptions. Acknowledge your biases. Then ask, how can I help create a fairer world? The anniversary video went viral, once again igniting digital dialogue. Viewers worldwide shared personal stories of institutional bias and moments of quiet discrimination. Social prompts amplified engagement. Share if you believe dignity belongs to everyone. Comment if you've witnessed bias in your community. Subscribe for more stories of reform and accountability. Tap the notification bell to join a movement for equality. Across platforms, discussion threads blossomed into meaningful conversations. How do we recognize unconscious bias in ourselves? What role should independent oversight play in preventing discrimination? A local tragedy had become a global catalyst for dialogue, reform, and renewal. How do communities ensure institutions remain accountable while encouraging meaningful reform? That final question echoed with viewers searching for purpose beyond passive observation. Judge Washington had turned 3 minutes of public humiliation into decades of systemic progress. Officer Mitchell's 3 weeks of bias exposed a flaw so deep it forced permanent change. The challenge was clear. What injustice in your own community could become the spark for transformation? Closing statistics revealed the story's measurable legacy. The original video reached 75 million views across global platforms, sparked over 2,000. New bias training programs nationwide raised 3.2 million dedicated to civil rights education and systemic reform. Permanently reshaped courthouse access policies across multiple states. Prevented countless discriminatory encounters through training, oversight, and accountability. The final message carried both hope and responsibility. Real change happens when dignity collides with injustice and refuses to shatter. Your voice carries weight. Your actions create ripples. Justice delayed remains injustice, but justice pursued with patience, courage, and integrity becomes justice for all. The power, the choice, rests with every viewer willing to confront bias and transform their own corner of the world.